Good morning. Happy Thursday. Gotta cheers the coffee. We got a Mickey cup today. So we started talking about money, and it's a very emotional topic. It's a topic where people have a lot of beliefs. We talked about a lot of the negative associations that people grow up with money. It's the root of all evil, all those types of things. And people really have a lot of approach avoidance. So, you want a certain amount of financial freedom, but then as you approach that financial freedom, there's guilt or there's, am I worthy enough or am I a bad person if I have too much money? So then you go, 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So there's a lot of self-sabotage in this area. And, really the thing that everybody needs to do, I think, is understand what money is and to just really make a decision as to where you want to be on that spectrum. Does money buy happiness? No, absolutely not. I mean, do we know of wealthy people who were terribly unhappy and addicted to drugs and ended up committing suicide? Sure. Do we know terribly wealthy people who are happier than hell? Absolutely. Go watch Richard Branson. Go take a look at Hugh Hefner. And so money doesn't buy happiness. Here's what money does do. And I've had the opportunity to be around, people with nothing, and I've personally met 4 billionaires in my lifetime, and I have friends who have significant sums of money. And, I've also been to a ton of these seminars on wealth building and business mastery and all this stuff. Money magnifies. That's what it does. If you all of a sudden, or even over time, develop financial freedom, it magnifies your current state. So if you're happy, you're going to be more happy. If you're depressed, you're going to be more depressed. If you're a jerk, you're going to be a bigger jerk. If you're generous, you're going to be more generous. So as you travel the road to financial freedom, if that's what you want, and there's nothing that says that you have to do that, but if that's what you want, then understand as you travel that road, it's going to magnify who you are. It does. The other thing that money does do is it does give an idea of freedom. And when I say an idea, I mean everybody's got their own idea of what freedom is. But money will allow you to do what you want when you want. And it absolutely does that. Money gives you the opportunity to go where you want, to do what you want. When the world falls apart like it is now, the wealthy people expand. The non-wealthy people, and when I say wealthy, I mean mentally, that their attitude is to accumulate. The wealthy people expand and the non-wealthy people contract. So if you watch the movie The Big Short, they explain to you this concept of this thing called a CBO. A CBO is where they take a bunch of mortgage bonds. Mortgage bonds are simply a group of mortgages that are put together into this one marketable product that people can buy. And when there's a bunch of mortgage bonds that aren't very good, they compile all of those if they don't sell on the market, and they call them a CBO. Well, there is a CBO product that is mortgage bonds specifically related to commercial real estate. So that's real estate typically in big cities, and it's going to be both residential and office. Typically it's office on the bottom or market space on the bottom, and then residential on the top. Not market space, but where stores are on the bottom, and then residential on the top. Right now, BlackRock, which is a hedge fund, has $168 billion sitting waiting to buy these CBO bonds for commercial loans on the secondary market. In other words, they're now expecting that tons of these mortgages are going to fall into foreclosure, which means the banks are going to get paid by the government to take the money and put it over into these collection companies. And then companies like Blackwater are going to come in and buy them at 30 cents on the dollar. And then eventually that debt will get bought back out and they'll triple their money. That's how wealthy people think. They look at a crisis as an opportunity, not by panic. And as a result, they expand. When something is burning to the ground, there's a lot more opportunity to make money. So I give you that idea just to start to do that mental shift. Where is it that you want to be in financial terms? Because wherever it is, you can absolutely accomplish it. I mean, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever, especially if you're watching me and you live in the United States of America, you can absolutely accomplish it. People think, well, I'm too young. Yeah, well, how many people have become millionaires these days who are under the age of 30? Well, I'm too old. Well, Ray Kroc didn't start McDonald's until he was in his 50s, and he became the wealthiest person in the world. Colonel Sanders didn't start Kentucky Fried Chicken until he was 65. He got his first Social Security check, and he decided, I'm not going to do this. This is not enough. And then he looked around and he was like, well, what do I have? Well, I have this chicken recipe. And he literally went around to different chicken places and said, I will cook for you for free. And then whatever the increase in sales that you have is, that is the amount of money that I'm going to make. You and I will split that. And if you don't have any increase in sales, then you won't pay me anything. He went from place to place to place to place. And when they had the increase in sales, then he turned them into a franchise with his chicken recipe. And he became a multimillionaire, and he didn't start until he was 65 years old. People say, well, I don't have enough education. All right, Steve Jobs had 1 year of college. I don't even think he finished that year. Bill Gates, same thing. Mark Zuckerberg, same thing. It's not about the education. It's not about your age. It's about whether or not you make a decision that this is what you're going to do, that you're going to accomplish this certain amount of finances. And we need to change our relationship to it. Creating a great deal of money doesn't necessarily mean that you're never going to see your family, that you're not going to be a good parent, that you're not going to be a good spouse because you're going to be spending all your time at the office. True, a lot of people who are super successful work like crazy, but that doesn't mean they don't have good relationships with their kids. I've lived 2,000 miles from my daughter for coming up on 10 years, and we have a great relationship. So just because I wasn't in the same house as her all the time doesn't mean that I didn't have an influence on her life and I'm not a part of her life. These psychological shifts are what we need to have, and a lot of it just comes from these little seeds that were planted to us when we were kids that, honestly, I don't know why. All of a sudden, society decided making money was a bad thing, and a lot of that was planted there. I have my theory that I'm not going to say because it's not super nice, quite frankly. But I mentioned yesterday the eye of the camel. Remember the whole Catholic thing that it's easier for a wealthy man to get into heaven. It's easier for a camel to get through the eye of the needle than it is for a wealthy man to get into heaven. Okay, well, so then you think to yourself, well, there's no way a camel can ever get through the eye of a needle, so that's not going to happen. So that means a wealthy man cannot get into heaven. Well, do you know what the eye of the needle is? It's an actual place. It's in Jerusalem, and it's an arch that is low to the ground. So the arch is about this tall, and the opening to it is about at my chest. So how would you get through that arch? Well, you got to get through that arch on your knees. So the whole point of that phrase wasn't to say that it's impossible for a wealthy man to get into heaven. What they were saying is the only way that a wealthy man can get into heaven is if he's penitent. The penitent man goes to heaven. That's the original position of Christianity. And so that was the whole source of that phrase. So these phrases have been taken out of context, and we have all these different ideas and all this guilt with regards to money. And the reality is if you want to be significantly wealthy, then go be significantly wealthy, because here's the thing. When you have significant wealth, you can do more. You can be incredibly generous. You can take care of the rest of your family. You can travel the world. Wealthy people do have the opportunity to influence more if they want to. And you can have that influence be a positive thing and not be a negative thing. So it doesn't matter your age. Like I said, Ray Kroc, Colonel Sanders didn't start until they were much later in life. Doesn't matter your education. In fact, I know they did the list of the wealthiest people in the United States, and like over half of them didn't even go to college. It doesn't matter what it is that you want to do, because if you're the best at it, I told you the story about the guy who was the doorman at the hotel in Las Vegas where Elvis Presley was, and he made $125,000 a year in the mid-'70s in tips. I mean, that was just because he was outstanding, and because of that, he was super successful financially. So decide on the amount of money that you want to make. Decide how it is that you're going to do that. Set up a plan and decide a date. And I'm going to leave you today with the story of Steven Spielberg. And then tomorrow we're going to talk about an actual system that has been implemented for years by wealthy people in order to develop and sustain wealth. And I'll go through that with you tomorrow. So Steven Spielberg decided when he was a young kid that he was going to be a filmmaker. And this is one of those where I'm like, if you really want to do something and you do it outstanding, it shows the financial response that can happen. And it's all just a matter of that you make a decision that that's what you want to do. So Spielberg is raised as an Orthodox Jew, originally from Ohio, I think, but then his family moved to Arizona. So there wasn't hardly any Jewish people. He was beat up as a kid. Eventually, his parents split up and his dad moved to Los Angeles. Now, Steven always said that he wanted to make movies, and he started making movies as a young kid. He was a Boy Scout. He found some solace in the Boy Scouts, and he made little tiny movies. He even borrowed his scout troop leader's camera once and made a little film, and he won an award for it. So he learned early on that he would be able... My puppy wants to go outside. Say hi to Mooch. Say, hi, Mooch! He learned early on that the best way for him to make movies was to stun people, to shock people. And he figured out how he could do that because he did it with his sisters. So he knew, I'm going to make movies. So he graduates from high school, and he decides that he wants to go to USC's film college. He doesn't get in because he doesn't have very good grades. So his parents split up. His dad's living in Los Angeles. He goes and lives with his dad, Marley. He goes and lives with his dad. Be quiet. Quiet. She's ready to be fed. And go. He goes and lives with his dad. He takes a tour at Universal Studios, and he enrolls in Long Beach, California, University of California at Long Beach. While he's on the tour at Universal Studios, he sees that there's an empty trailer. He literally went home that day. The next day, got up, put on a suit, grabbed a briefcase, remembered the name of the guy at the front gate, and came walking in with such certainty. When he said the guy's name, the guy let him in. He set up shop at the trailer, put his name on the front of it, and started going to sets and just taking notes and paying attention. He remembered people's names. Now, if you've ever been on a set in Hollywood, I mean, they're a little bit chaotic, okay? So to just walk on and all of a sudden be somebody walking around isn't all that hard to do, because this is all artsy-fartsy people. So things are just a little weird, I've been on a set. They're kind of a little bit out there. So he just started interacting with people. And he kept doing stuff and showing up every day, and he kept learning. And then he started making these little movies. So eventually he did a 26-minute film on 33 millimeter, and he brought it to the president of the studio. And the president of the studio said, who are you and what are you doing here? And Steven came clean and said, well, honestly, I'm just been here learning. I want to make movies. I want to be a great filmmaker. I want to be, I want to make some of the greatest thrill. He always wanted to make thriller movies. Alfred Hitchcock was one of the guys who he would watch. He wanted to make movies that thrilled people. He wanted to make a movie that was like a roller coaster, he used to say. So they watched the 26 millimeter film, and the president was so impressed that he gave him an internship. That little 26-minute movie that he made actually won several awards, and Universal Studios signed him to a 7-year deal. And he hadn't even finished his first year in college. He actually did go back later and finish college because it was something that his parents had always wanted him to do. But by 19 years old, he had a 7-year contract and he was making movies. And by the way, Lucas, him, and De Palma were all friends. They all came to Hollywood at the same time, and they all used to hang out trying to figure out what type of movies they were going to make. And when Lucas came up with the idea for Star Wars, the only one that thought that it had promise was Spielberg. It wasn't long after that Spielberg did Jaws, which put him on the map and won all the awards in the world, and he developed the idea of the summer blockbuster. That was really his creation. Spielberg did that. Spielberg is now worth $3.6 billion. So you got to have an idea of what it is that you want to do and why. It's everything that we've already talked about, but remember that this is 80% psychological and 20% science. It's 20% strategy, but the strategy has been the same for everybody. So this isn't rocket science. This isn't reinventing the wheel. This is simply making a decision that this is how you're going to live your life and you're not going to feel guilty about it. That's really what the deal is. So for today, figure out what you want, figure out when you want to buy, figure out how much you want. Get over the conditioning that you're too young, you're too old, you don't have enough education, you're living in the wrong place, whatever it is, you're not the right color, you're not the right sex, because none of that matters. The first African-American billionaire to ever hit the planet graduated from Freeport High School. Bob Johnson graduated from Freeport High School, started the BET network, and he became the first African-American billionaire. Anybody can do it, folks. Go have a great day. We're all in this together. Let's take care of each other. We're going to get through this, and I'll see you tomorrow.